Welcome to Taking Healthy Back with Maria, with your host, Maria Malik, experience coach, conscience educator, and destination retreat host, presents to you countless ways to overcome an overwhelmed, overprocessed, and over-medicated lifestyle. She'll be covering everything wellness, from getting more from life than you put into it, destination retreats to healthy cooking and conscious education. So please welcome the host of Taking Healthy Back with Maria.
Happy Friday, Wellness Seekers. Welcome back to Taking Healthy Back with Maria. I'm your host, Maria Malik. Today, we have Karen Laos, a communication expert and confidence cultivator. Are you a person with self-doubt, perfectionism, and people-pleasing qualities? Is this something that you feel has been holding you back? Well, today we're going to have a powerful conversation with this expert whose mission is to help 10 million women ask for what they want without hesitation, which is pretty exciting. And I'm really excited to introduce to you Karen Laos. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be here.
Happy to have you on. Like I said before, I could have used your help about 15 years ago, and I'm sure the topic today is going to pique a lot of interest because there's a lot of people out there, I feel today, especially who are having those issues with self-doubt and perfectionism. And you seem like the person to talk to about that. So welcome.
Thank you, Maria.
I want to know, let's just start because it's the theme of the show on how you believe that your communication skills and confidence cultivating is helping women reclaim their health. Because health isn't just about the supplements you take or the food you eat or the exercise. It's you know, our emotions and our mind. So let's start there.
Sure. Well, as you probably know, there's all the research that points to the things that we sit and wonder about and have angst around are usually people issues, things with a friend or a relative or a work scenario, business. And so when you are equipped with the confident communication skills to be able to handle these things, it makes life a lot easier. You don't have to wonder, wait, how am I going to do that? And I was even speaking with a client yesterday, and she said, I keep putting off having to have this difficult conversation. She's put it off for almost a year, and it is killing her. She is thinking about it all the time. And so if she, again, it's like, and I get it, like it's challenging for all of us, but when we are equipped with the tools, we become more confident as a result. So I would say that the biggest thing is having the practical examples of how do you actually have the conversation? And then how do you show up in your voice and your body language and your tone? So a huge part of what I talk about is really two things. It's the message as well as the body language and tone.
Okay, so you're at first I thought you were just speaking to women who wanted to be speakers, and you talk about like owning the boardroom or owning the room in a diverse situation. So it sounds like you're talking about communication skills on the very basic human level, relationship people to people.
All across the board. So I'm a big believer in. So for example, a lot of people say, well, Karen, I need help on public speaking. And I always kind of chuckle with that term because I say, is there really such a thing as private speaking? I mean, unless you're in the shower or you're talking to yourself in the car, you typically always have an audience. So we have to get out of this thought process that we compartmentalize these skills for public speaking on a stage. So of course I do both, but I shouldn't say of course. I mean, yes, you had it right for sure that I help people command rooms in general, but it's also commanding yourself, feeling that confidence because you know what to say and how to say it in any situation that you're faced with. And that's a huge part. Actually, I wrote a book which is a whole playbook for confident communication. And there are multiple situations in there. And that is a big part of what I stand for, is that practicality in how to communicate.
Wow. Is that the name of the book?
It's
Can you
called
repeat
it
that?
the book is yeah, the book is called Trust Your Own Voice.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
Yeah, and the subtitle is Growing Your Influence Through Confident Communication.
I have a friend of mine was joking with me today that I have like 12 books on my nightstand, and it's the truth. And sometimes you just can't read one book all the way through. So I do kind of piecemeal and read a bunch of books at one time. And okay, now I recant what I said at the beginning. I could probably use your help today, not just 15 years ago. You know, the one of the bane of my existence is communication with others, and especially within the family.
Mm,
Lack of communication because of hurting people's feelings, or treating people, or I'll say mistreating people with lack of communication, and always having to assume and wonder what they're thinking and perceiving their actions. So do you work with folks within their families a lot, or are you just working with women who kind of bring it back to the family?
the latter. Yeah, it's typically back. Now, if somebody came to me with that, I would definitely love to help. It's all about, because the skills are universal. Again, while my focus is women, the skills are universal. But I find it really fascinating and also sobering, just the way that we as women have been culturally conditioned. And most of us are people pleasers, or we're always looking at everybody else and we want everybody to feel good. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That hurts us sometimes. It costs us because we're so fixated on tiptoeing around everybody and making them feel good that we also lose ourselves. So, a lot of the things I work with women on is also boundaries. How do you have the conversations to have the boundaries that you need to have so that you don't get walked over? Or maybe you're not walked over, but you just need to be clear with the expectations from somebody. And
Right.
while typically those things are happening at work that I'm dealing with people around, it certainly translates to other situations, community as well, volunteer situations,
Mhm.
church or PTA or what have you.
Well, even with friendships, and I'm experiencing that now with different friends where I actually became vulnerable and expressed, where I felt maybe I wasn't heard as a friend, and then the friend didn't respond.
Mm,
And that pings a wound, and kind of reinforces a core belief, like maybe I'm not worthy of being responded to,
mhm.
and that's actually something I'm currently working through. So do you find that the communication issues with women are just with their partners, or is there a large part of it with women friends?
I'd say that it's absolutely both. The
Okay.
biggest theme that I see with women friends is the lack of boundaries or the assumptions and expectations. So for
Mhm.
example, this I'll give you an example with a friendship related to work. So when I first left corporate in 2003, I launched as a career coach at that time.
Okay.
And my friends were used to me doing their resumes for free. It was no big deal. I'd had a job, so I was just, give them some tips. So I had a pivotal moment when I launched my business and I was no longer getting paid by the company. And a friend asked me to do her resume. And I remember talking with my therapist about it at the time because I was so anxious about it. I
Mm.
was so conditioned to accommodate everybody else. I grew up in a very traditional home.
Me
And
too.
did you?
Mm.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
My dad called the shots. My mom was just very submissive to him and raised the
Yeah.
kids and all the things. Yeah. And so what I learned and also was incredibly empowering is that I went back to her, and I'll just call her Sue. I said, Sue, I would love to help you with your resume. And as you know, I've recently launched my business. So if I do help you, I will need to charge you for that. Would you
Okay.
like to take part in my services, or would you like to do that? And of course she said no, but it made me feel good. I mean, I didn't expect her to say yes, to be honest,
Mhm.
but I felt good about that a lot. But what I was also going to say that I did, which can sometimes be an option, I don't think you always have to do this second part, but because I also had a resume template, I said, here's a template. You can use mine for free. Like, just take the template. So, as a
Right.
friend, I thought that would be at least
Sure,
something.
sure.
Yeah. So, that I will tell you though, that was the beginning of this feeling of empowerment. And when we talk about mental health, this feeling of confidence and wow, like you do it, you learn a couple of skills. I had the words, I practiced a few times, and then actually when I did it, it felt okay. It was scary right before I got the words out, but I remember the feeling after. And then that was the starting point of more and more, just more and more ease related to boundaries.
Yeah, and I find that when we push through that thing that we're so scared of, like one time I went skydiving, and the whole reason why I did that, with someone on my back, I didn't do it alone. But
Yeah.
once I did it, I was like, what was I so afraid of? Or, what took me so long to make that jump? And so I really understand what you're saying.
Hmm.
It looks like we're already at a commercial break time, so we'll continue the conversation when we get back. Stay tuned.
Sounds
Thank you. Right back. Or maybe not.
I think sometimes we do the things that we didn't have. So I didn't have that when I was setting my business. And I didn't have people telling me, hey, oh, this is the hole that you have. And here's some people that can help fill that hole. You don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to, you
Right,
can,
right.
but we're not meant to
I
do it ourselves as business people either.
Okay, and that's a question that I have also. And I was raised to be a housewife, and I wasn't raised to have a career. And I don't know how many other women my age or, various ages were groomed in that way. And at this point in my life, I don't really want to start a career. Are there women in the group who are not business entrepreneur oriented that are a part of the group just to help them, I don't want to say find themselves, but really be okay with where they are and not pursuing these big dreams, because there's a big push out there for women to be these, hardcore powerful women, empowered, which I want women to be empowered, but I don't believe everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. Are there women in the group who just want to be women or moms, or just be okay with where they are and give themselves permission? Does that all make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I'm going to say this and just expand it a little because I feel like all of us need to be okay with where we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have some people that are in a different season, right? And so we have some people some people call it empty nesters or whatever, little titles that we have to it. Right. And that's a very special season that needs to be nurtured and understood. But what I say to people that tell me, well, and I had a couple of women, it was really beautiful conversation we had on our last retreat, as a matter of fact. And someone said, I'm in this stage, I've already had a business, I've done a business, I've sold my business, or I've left the business, or I retired.
Welcome back. We're talking with Karen Laos, a communication expert and confidence cultivator. I'm sure this is appealing to many of our listeners. Karen, let's go back to your early experience. I like the story on your site where your first negotiating experience was when you were 6 years old at a flea market. Tell us how that experience years later has expanded into what you're doing now.
Yeah, it was really funny. And I think I say I have in my bio something like coached by my father, but let's be honest, he handed me a few dollars and he said, go have fun, but never pay full price. So it was just basically a little girl trying to please her dad. Frankly, that's where it started. But I will tell you, it was so energizing. That was the first time that I realized you didn't have to pay what was exactly on whatever the list price was. And so that really informed a lot of things in my life. And my dad did say throughout our lives growing up, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And
Right.
you have if you don't ask. It was very, very drilled into me that you need to ask for what you want. And so negotiating and asking has never been a problem for me for the most part overall. And I say for the most part because I also want to say that it's important to acknowledge that years later in a corporate environment, I didn't ask directly. I made a passive ask, and that was due to me being intimidated by my boss. And I probably wasted about a year of my life as a result. I shouldn't say wasted. I believe everything ends up fine and working out. But I will say I definitely it's interesting. I kind of realized, so I'll just finish with that story. So I had asked her because she was inviting me to be on a more formal leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
And in corporate, titles are pretty important. And so I said, well, I'm a senior manager. Everybody else is director or above. What does that mean for me? And that was a passive ask. And she said, oh, yeah, yeah, we'll have to figure all that out. Well, then months later, I brought it up casually again. I did not set up a meeting for it. And then when we had my review, I fully expected to get promoted.
Right.
And she looked at me and we had a good relationship. She said, "Oh, something's off, Karen." And I said, well, I thought I was going to be promoted. She didn't even remember those
Oh,
conversations.
wow.
And so we chuckled and I said, I want to do over. If I could do this over, I would ask you and say, Kelly, I would like to have a promotion if I'm going to be on the leadership team. What is getting in my way if you don't think I'm ready? And if you think I'm ready, could we make that happen before I start with the team? So that is a totally different feel.
Mm.
Come to realize is that when I've asked and negotiated, it's usually related to an object or a thing, like at a flea market, a product or a service. And sometimes it's about an opportunity. But what I realized is that isolated scenario with her, I felt intimidated by her. And I came to realize through lots of therapy later that she was really the archetype of my dad. And he was quite
Oh.
yeah, he was quite dismissive. And yeah, she was a wonderful human being, but sometimes would be dismissive. But even when she wasn't dismissive and just being herself, she was
Mm.
similar to my dad. And I had felt so intimidated by him that I brought all of that baggage with me. And that is the thing that got in my way. So this is also something that I help women with is what is getting in your way from making the ask. And if we can figure that out, combined with the communication skills as well as the presence as well as the message, then that can get us where we want to go.
Right. And I'm learning through my wholeness journey, healing, that those things, like the way you said, it reminded me of your dad. That's probably an old wounding,
Yes.
and then it became a core belief that you kept telling yourself. So it sounds like, and I'm sure we all do it a lot, is we're always in a constant state of negotiation within our own minds, negotiating. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? If I ask, all these different questions that go on.
Right.
Wow, I feel like we're having a little counseling session right here because it's really opening my eyes to some things that I've been working on currently. So that's really cool. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Are you finding that women are once they talk to you, how long is someone working with you? It sounds like, I mean, right now, 20 minutes, and I already feel that I've had some kind of revelations just by the things that you're sharing. So what kind of results are women getting when they work with you, and what's that time frame look like?
Yeah, well, it can be very quick, and it also depends on what the person is going for. But I would
Mhm.
say typically if they're working on confidence, we're talking about things that they have carried with them for a long time. And so on
Mm.
average, it's 6 months. But I will tell you about one person in particular who was terrified of public speaking, and that was her goal, is to be up on a stage. And within months, she already felt more confident after a couple of sessions, but then within months she was on a stage of 200 people. Then
Okay.
she found it so energizing that within that year she was on the stage with 3 different people. And she and I are still working together because I have a group mastermind that people tend to stay in for a year or two. It just
Okay.
depends. Yeah. But it can also happen, like you said, I have a jumpstart session for somebody that has a very specific goal. It's a 90-minute session. We do lots of video recording because most of the work that I do is video and role play. So we'll
Oh,
video, have let's say somebody wants to work on their elevator pitch or their introduction, or they simply have to deal with a conflict with somebody, or they want to jumpstart on their communication skills. Like I have somebody who is about to launch her book. So she wants to have a jumpstart. And that jumpstart is really about your presence, like recording how you come across, seeing the things you're doing well with your hand gestures, your eye contact, your body language.
mhm.
And then that can be a great start to carry on from there. But for sustainable change, most of the people that I work with when coaching, it's a longer term thing.
Okay. What does gem start mean? Did you
Gem?
say gem?
I don't think so. Oh, jump,
Oh,
start.
jump
Wait,
start. Okay, I'm like gem
jump.
start. Okay, there's something behind that. Okay,
Thank you
just
for
forget,
asking. I
just
need to
forget that
articulate.
question. It's my hearing, apparently.
It could be my articulation too. So jump. Yes.
Jump start. Okay, I get it. I get it. So you have various different levels that women can work with you. And
Yes.
what does a year-long program look like? Because that could be daunting to someone like, oh my gosh, I'm going to work with someone for a year. What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing as 6 months. That's why people usually start with a 6 month commitment, but
Mhm.
ultimately people are paying per month. It's a monthly membership, and
Okay.
you have 2 one-on-one sessions plus 2 group sessions, and then unlimited access to me in between via a voice memo app called Voxer, which you may be familiar with.
Yes.
So that is how it works. And then over time, we figure out number one, we figure out what your goals are. So we have a strategy session right up front. What are the goals? What do you want to accomplish? And a lot of that is actually done in advance before we even start working together, because I've got to figure out if it's the right fit, and the other person, I would want them to do the same. Is the chemistry right? And
Sure.
can I even help the person? So I always tell people, if I can't help you, I know somebody in my network who can. But yeah, we figure out the strategy, and then we walk them through my signature framework, which is called the confidence cocktail. And there are 8 ingredients that I work with people on to get to that confidence around becoming a clear, compelling, and credible communicator.
I love it. I love it. Um, Wow, that's beautiful. And your website is actually beautiful also and has a lot of great information for people. I know it's probably something I should say at the end, but I'm just going to mention I know you have a free gift on your website, the 9 words to avoid and what to say instead. So
Yeah.
I'll make sure that I put that in the comments and description so people can avail themselves to that. Um, I'd like to know, how does emotional intelligence play a role in confident communication?
Yeah, I've got immediate thing. If anybody that's listening is a rambler, I'm a recovering rambler myself. So a lot of us tend to talk about a lot of detail, or we data dump in our conversations and we don't get to the point. So you can relate, me too. So
That's me.
yeah. So the tip that I would say related to emotional intelligence, the first step is you have to be aware that you're rambling. And a lot of times people aren't. So starting with, if we think about, there's four components to emotional intelligence. And the first two, number one is, are you aware of yourself? And then number two, are you aware of how you're coming across to others in relationship with them? And
Mhm.
so we have to be able to read the room as well. But first, you've got to be able to read yourself. So
Yeah.
that's step one. And then the tip that I have that I taught myself that seems to work for a lot of people is to pause. Gather your thoughts in those 1 to 2 seconds. First of all, notice you're rambling, then pause, then say out loud, my point is this. That will help you recalibrate, and it will help your audience recalibrate and go, oh, she has a point. So if you somehow get lost, that's the best way to do it. And if you're not comfortable saying the my point is out loud, then just
Mhm.
gather your thoughts, state your point, and move things along. So that's one of the number one things. And then the second one is what I touched on already, is being able to read the room,
Mhm.
noticing people's energy levels. And a big part of this is challenging because now thinking more on the speaking to larger groups scenario, or maybe being nervous about being in a meeting, we can be so fixated on ourselves and how nervous we are or how awkward we're feeling or whatever those feelings are. We forget that we are there for a purpose to meet the needs of the audience. So if we can remember, hey, I've got a whole audience here in front of me. They need something from me. I am here to deliver something. So what are they looking for? And that can help us get out of our own heads and be more aware of reading the room, and then also be more effective and relevant.
Okay, we have another commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about how you help introverts, because I hear a lot of people out there say they're introverts, but I don't even know what that means, because I don't believe I am one of those. But I know that's something a lot of people struggle with. And if you're an introvert, it's going to be even that much harder to communicate with people. So we'll talk about that when we get back.
Great.
Thank you. So, what lessons have you learned that you can impart with our listeners?
I would say without a doubt, the big lesson that I've learned in all this is the importance of the people that you choose to allow to be around you. That has been
Love
absolutely
that.
life. I know for whatever reason, I used to fancy myself as a great leader when I was growing up. I thought I was a leader amongst all the kids and all that stuff. But all I know is every time I hung around people that did drugs, I did drugs. And so I needed to understand that stepfather growing up, he'd always tell me, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are.
And you would
Yes.
think, even a VA hospital, if you're a veteran, that they would have a program like this. You
You would
know,
think, yeah, you would think, but it's not as simple to resolve as it sounds, because you have to have the volunteer personnel, you have to have the
Mhm.
space, you have to, it's not just watching the dog, it's being able to take that dog to a veterinarian if it needs medical attention.
Mhm.
Um, there's just so many components to it. And I know this because we put the program together, and we've been learning as we've gone, because there's no one we can call and go, hey, how did you handle this? So I mean, we've really learned a lot, and I understand why it's not as easy as it's.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking with Karen Laos, communication expert and confidence cultivator. I asked the question before break about how to help introverts communicate better.
One of the first things to do, especially as an introvert, is to prep. prep. The more you can be prepared with your talking points in advance, the more comfortable you're going to feel in the scenario. The second thing related to prep is to record yourself. This is frankly advice for everybody, but if you haven't recorded yourself and heard yourself in a real situation, even if it's a mock situation, that's fine too, but it's especially great when you can record yourself. And if you can't do video, then at least audio, so you get a better sense of the awareness of how you come across.
Mhm.
Now, most people don't like the sound of their voice. Most people don't love to watch themselves on video, but that's what people are seeing anyway. And the more aware you can become, the better. And then a third tip is to create a celebration portfolio. And
Hmm,
this is a
I like
list of two things. Yeah. One is a list of your accomplishments, so the things you've done. But then the second part of the list is something people don't think about too often, and that is making a list of your character qualities or your character
that.
strengths. And I love this because it helps people. For example, if you're like, I often work with people who are interviewing within their company, or they're interviewing for a new job or a special project. A lot of times we're so used to just touting all of our accomplishments, but we forget that a massive part of what makes us be good at our jobs and be a desirable candidate is a likability factor, for example, or we get things done quickly,
Mhm.
or people, yeah, again, the likability I find is a big one. Warmth is another one,
Mm.
or you meet deadlines. Those personality qualities that seem so often basic, perhaps to us, can
Mhm.
they're things that we often don't think to articulate, but when we articulate them, it highlights them not only in our minds, but when we can communicate that to others, it is super helpful.
How about that sounds more all professional. How about relational with family and friends who
Yeah.
are afraid to communicate and then they just shove their emotions down and it'll come out in some way down the road.
Yeah, this is another example of practicing for sure. So often we don't think about this because it's personal. We think, oh, well,
Right.
that would be a work thing. And so I would say connect with a friend, or if you have a coach, great, even better, but a
Mhm.
friend that you trust, and say, hey, I want to practice this conversation with you. And when
Oh,
practice, yeah, that's the role play that I'm talking about. When we practice in advance, the cool thing about our brains is that our subconscious brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not.
correct.
So I'm sure you know all of these things too. And so the beautiful thing about that is that when we practice, our brain almost feels like we've been there before. So that then when we are in that real scenario, your brain says, oh, I'm familiar with this. So the anxiety can go down. The other thing that I want to share too, yeah, just the tip around anxiety. Again, this is often a common thing that people know, but just to clarify for anyone who hasn't heard it before, is that physiologically, there's no difference between nervousness and excitement. And so we need to trick our brains to say, I'm so excited about having this conversation with my friend.
Oh, that's right.
I can't wait to have this conversation to build understanding. So when we can start projecting the positive, that also helps to channel that nervous energy into positivity. And that will also help us have a more productive outcome, whether it's a friend or whether it's in business.
That's great. That really is confirmation because I've been playing a scenario in my head, a conversation actually, just like you're talking about, and I just thought I was obsessing over
Mhm.
it and basically expecting the worst if that conversation ever came about. So, I like the idea of choosing someone you feel safe with to practice the conversation and it's a confirmation that I'm not obsessing. I'm just kind of training my brain to produce the outcome that I'm looking for, basically.
Mhm. Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
awesome. That's great. Sometimes we don't know what we need, or we don't know what we don't know. And
Mhm.
why I'm so happy to have this conversation with you and many of the conversations I've had throughout the podcast, because I really do learn something every time that's going to help me personally. And I'm hoping our conversation is helping those who are watching, because they didn't even know these are some things that they needed to bring attention to. So, um, yeah, you're great, Karen. I mean,
Thank you.
we met through a mutual friend, and that friend has introduced me to a lot of amazing people, such as yourself. And it's really great to bring all these different minds and, building this community of people who are just interested in helping other people and making an
Yes.
impact.
Yes.
And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm rambling, but looking at the current state of affairs in our world, globally, we need more conversations like this. It shouldn't just be reserved for podcasts or, personal
Yeah.
conversations. I really believe that, in the day there were knitting circles and, cooking class, things where women especially got together and
Yes.
had these tough conversations, and why your services are really needed, because we need to get back to that, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm right there with you, Maria. I will say that this group, the Powerhouse, that meets twice a month, it is so interesting because when COVID happened, that's when I left my job,
Hmm.
and then I started coaching, specifically doing coaching groups. And then I decided, then I thought, I need to make this a longer term thing because people love the group so much, because it used to be 6 weeks.
Hmm.
And then I was I remember in my head thinking, I need to make sure that I'm giving them communication tips, trying to make sure they get value. And time again, I hear women say, "Oh my gosh, the best part of this," they say, "We love your tips, Karen, but the best part is knowing I'm not alone, is talking with other women around situations that they're dealing with and realizing, wow, I'm in the same boat." So I'm right there with you. That is something that I would not have thought of 2 years ago when I started it.
Great.
So
And is that a subscription group? Is it a, like a social media group? How can someone become
yeah,
a part of the group?
yeah, it is a membership. So it's an application process. So they would need to have a call with me. Usually I do a couple calls. I start with the first call to determine if we're a fit. And then
Hmm.
from there, we walk through my framework. And then it is a membership subscription. So it's a paid membership once a month. Yeah.
Okay. And what's it called again? The Powerhouse Group?
Yep. Just the Powerhouse.
The Powerhouse. Okay, my pen's not working, but I'll remember that. The
Yeah.
Powerhouse. Um,
Yeah.
okay, I have another question. What's the first step to rebuilding confidence after someone has had a major disappointment?
Ah, boy. Well, I got to tell you a story about that, and then I'll give
Okay.
you the tip. Major disappointment for me a couple years ago was getting a call back to speak on the TEDx stage in my hometown of Minneapolis. That's where I grew up. I live in San Francisco now.
Okay.
And then the callback was amazing, great interview. The woman lived 4 blocks from my childhood home and used to actually deliver my mom's paper as a kid, and just amazing connection. And she said, "Well, there's 17 speakers that we've shortlisted, and now we're choosing 6."
Ooh.
Well, a few days later, I got the rejection email, and boy, I'm pretty good at letting things just roll off my shoulders. But
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that I would recommend when you're greatly disappointed is to grieve. And what that looks like is writing it down, talking about it with somebody, writing down. Sometimes people create a loss inventory. This would be a list of things that you have lost in your life. Now, that would be more of, hey, let's sit down. If you're feeling like you're stuck, creating a loss inventory is really great, where you do more of an overall inventory. But if it's one disappointment, like my example, I
Right.
frankly cried. I talked with friends about it. I wrote down in my journal about my feelings around that. And then I realized by the end of the day, you know what? I'm actually going to be on business in Minneapolis this week. Why don't I reach out to her and
Mhm.
ask her if she wants to have coffee? Because we had such a great connection. So I wrote her and I just said, "Hey, Megan, this must have been really hard to send an email like this. I can only imagine how challenging that is when you wanted me to speak so much as well." Because she chose, there's different curators at TEDx. And
Right.
then she said yes, because I said, "Would you like to have coffee?" We had coffee. She ended up saying, "You would be an excellent speaker coach for us, but I can't make that decision, but I can introduce you to the head speaker coach." And I had to jump through a few hoops, but I ended up being a speaker coach for the TEDx team. And then months
Wow.
later, they nominated me to be the MC of the entire event.
Whoa.
So it was better than I could have ever imagined. And to me, that was a huge divine appointment of God knowing better
Yes.
than and looking back, it was the best thing that I could have done, even more than being a speaker. I had such a great time. It was like hosting the Oscars, and I had a co-MC, and it's TEDx, they're
Wow.
long. They're 4 to 5 hour events, sometimes 6. So
Well,
that
and
was
it just proves that a disappointment just means not no, but no for now, and that something better might be coming along. It's kind of a delay to the thing that's better. Wow, I
it,
mean, that does sound incredible. Did you ever get to do a TEDx talk?
no, I did not. I feel like I'm not even sure if I want to right now. I really love coaching the TEDx folks. I've learned a tremendous amount about the whole thing. It is a very, how should we play this? I don't want to say grueling. That sounds awful, but I mean, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. There's touch points. There are so many restrictions related to the Big TED organization. There's certain
Really?
things you can and can't say, just all due out of respect for the organization and it just there's a lot of important restrictions, but I'm such a free flow person that
Mm-hmm.
I think it would trip me up, and I think it would be harder for me. Yeah, because it's very yeah, you've got to be exact, and I'm really
Wow.
good at saying the time, but the exact words, and I'm not a memorizer. I don't believe in that. I don't teach that, but TEDx,
Good.
yeah, is a very different ball game.
That's interesting. I've always wanted to. I've already started composing a TEDx talk. We'll have to talk about that another time.
Yeah,
You mentioned divine appointment. We have one more break coming up, and I want to ask you a question about that when we get back. So
great.
stay tuned.
Instead of taking a toxic pill to help with erections or, for sexual health, I encourage men to start really changing the diet so we can start clearing out some of this lymphatic stuff out of the lymphatic system. This help opens up the blood vessels and widens them to get the blood flow so they can maintain and sustain a good erection. In addition to that, using like watermelon and also juicing the watermelon skin itself, because this has citrulline in it, and this is also an amino acid that helps with this as well. That a question a lot too. So yeah, so usually I am a plant-based athlete. So I am a power lifter, and I eat fruit, juice, and plants. And I usually have juice for breakfast every day, and then I eat a whole food plant-based diet throughout the day. And yes, I do have sweets and treats and snacks and stuff at times. But overall, I would say my nutrition is pretty good, and I do eat more holistically, and I feel like that's why, I've reversed aging and I don't have any sickness, disease, or medications, and I feel great.
Same with me. Um, I I love everything that you're saying. It's given me a revived motivation to do more of it. Welcome back. We're talking with Karen Laos, who is a communication expert and confidence cultivator. When we broke for break last time, I mentioned I want to ask you a question about the divine. do you bring God into your coaching? Is that something that you feel comfortable doing? Because I believe that we can't do anything without our creator. And I'd like to know how you handle that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not somebody that is, let's say, like I don't lead with that, but
Hmm.
I definitely am a believer for sure and am very strong. I believe in Jesus and that's my faith, but I don't
Okay.
put any pressure on people for that. It's more of, hey, this is, yeah, so I will use God or divine appointment as well. I believe that I'm called to serve everybody. So
Sure.
if I know somebody is of the same faith, then I will often pray. We'll pray before our session, we'll pray for guidance and then pray after. And it all depends. So, and it's if somebody, even if they're not, but maybe they're going through a hard time, I will ask, may I pray for you? So
Okay.
I'm very comfortable praying out loud, but it isn't something that I typically do. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Have you ever had anyone not work with you because of your belief system? Do
No,
you
not
think?
that I know of. I've never had somebody flat out say that. No.
Okay, no, that's cool because I've been working with that myself because I don't want to deny what my faith and what I believe in, and I think it's an integral part of what I do. So it's nice to hear someone who, your opinion and how you work around it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I remember years, when was it? A few years ago. Well, I launched during COVID, so everything is in the last few years. And I remember the first time I was sharing a story around having some type of mantra or something, like what is it that kind of the invitation of, do you have something that guides you? And I shared the story of how many years ago I was praying for a verse in the Bible to that, like a life verse or something. So it was, I just thought it
Mhm.
was so cool that I was praying for that. And then I just opened the Bible and right there was Ephesians 10:24. And it's to encourage one another to outbursts of love and good deeds. And I
Wow.
thought, that is why I'm here. Like that made it just helped clarify that I am here to encourage people. And then for me in my profession, it's taking it to that next step, encouraging people in their giftings, in these communication
Nice.
skills. And so that can cover so many things. And then it was also particularly fun that 10/24 is my birthday. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is really cool. And that's great. Thank you for sharing. How
Yeah.
how do you stay grounded while coaching others to project confidence? But when you work with people, sometimes we take on some of what they're going through. So how do you keep that at bay and stay grounded yourself?
Yeah, a lot of it is honestly self-regulating techniques if I need to do those. I find that I've become really good over the years at being able to separate myself from the person. But to your point, especially in the beginning when I was younger, I mean, I was just absorbing all of these things. I
Yeah.
was thinking about it so much. But working out, like just as far as a standard practice, working out regularly, I do Orange Theory, I also do yoga. And then some of the
Okay.
self regulating techniques are really the deep breathing. And one of the things that I love that my chiropractor taught me years ago, which is just as simple as putting your hand around your heart and then your hand at your stomach and just rubbing them around a little bit in a circular motion, that can help ground you back to your core.
That's
So that's one
great.
of them. Yeah, I love twirling, where like a little girl, when you get up and you twirl, that's also I learned is a self-regulating technique. And
I love
even
it.
tapping yourself, that's another one to get you back
Yes.
into what's called the window of tolerance. So that's a whole other thing. But when we're regulated versus dysregulated, it's well, obviously it's hard to make decisions at our in our best self when we're dysregulated. And a lot of people get dysregulated when they're nervous about speaking or they're nervous about a difficult conversation they need to have. So I teach these breathing techniques to do before you're walking into a difficult or situation that's making you nervous?
Wow, you have just brought so many things to the table that people can use right away with all your wonderful tips. Um, Sadly, we're at the end of our conversation. I can't believe how fast it went. I really love everything that you shared, and it's giving me encouragement and hope for my own future and proficiency in communicating. And I would love to work with you at some point because it sounds like I can use some of the things that you have to offer. And I'm sure a lot of folks who either have watched or will watch will find great value and benefit to them. So, Karen, do you have any parting words before we
Yes.
get going?
My parting words are to speak first. When you're in a meeting, to speak first. There's always that or a networking event when there's usually that awkward silence of, okay, everybody, let's go around the room and introduce themselves, or who wants to start us off with their update. When you speak first, it helps you come across as a leader. It also shows that it number one also does not make you have to think the whole time of, oh, I need to say
Right,
something. Oh, and then being nervous about what you're going to say, and then you're not even present listening to other people. So
right,
that's one very tactical thing. And then the other thing I would add is to trust yourself, because you know
right.
more than you think. And it's, as somebody
Yes,
just said this morning, she said, put your finger up in front of you, point your finger, and then turn it around. And she said, that's your fingerprint. There's no other person like you, and you have a lot of value to bring to the world. Yeah. I
I
thought that
love
was
it. Yeah, and everybody get Karen's book, Trust Your Own Voice. And I'll put that information in the description. But another great conversation, Taking Healthy Back with Maria. And we'll see you next week. Thank you, Karen, so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it as well.
This has been Taking Healthy Back with your host, Maria. Tune in each week as Maria will empower you to put your wellness in your control right here, Fridays, noon Eastern on